I used to think revenge was for those consumed by hatred. But after watching my sister be stripped of everything, her home, her career, her daughter, I realized sometimes revenge isn't just about release. It's about justice. I didn't break anything. I didn't scream. I didn't kill anyone. I learned how to play his game, and I won. This is the story of a woman who spent 9 years crafting the perfect revenge against the man who destroyed her family. He thought he was the perfect predator. But on the day he raised a glass to toast his victory on a yacht, I raised mine to send him over the edge. Think you know how this ends. Think again. This story goes deeper than you ever imagined. Chapter 1. The call at 3:47 a.m., 3:47 in the morning. The phone rang just as I was dreaming of something I couldn't remember. And I knew. The moment I looked at the screen, I already knew. My world was about to shatter. He's gone. Emma's voice whisper fractured as if breaking into pieces. Everything. All of it is gone. I jolted up from the small bed in my suffocating studio apartment. Cold sweat ran down my back. Emma, my sister. The strongest woman I had ever known. The one who hadn't shed a tear since we were children. If she was crying today, then something catastrophic had happened. I don't understand. You mean Brandon? What did he do? He took everything. The house, the company, the accounts, even Lily's college fund. Her voice broke. The lawyer said I signed all the papers, but I don't remember signing anything. I don't even have enough money left to hire someone to fight him. At that moment, I couldn't tell if I was more afraid for her or furious on her behalf. Maybe both. But the only thing I knew for certain was this Emma was not the kind of woman who got tricked easily. She was the planner, the one who had everything mapped out in an Excel sheet. If even she could lose everything to one man, then that man was very, very dangerous. I remembered the last time she smiled brightly at me through a video call. Back then, Emma told me she'd met someone named Brandon at a networking event in Chicago. A man who was different, that's how she described him. No flashy cars, no bragging about money. He asked about Lily, about her business dreams. He wanted to invest in her, not just with money, but with emotion. And Emma, the woman always so guarded against the world, believed that at last someone didn't see her as just a divorced woman standing alone, but as someone worthy of building a future with. 3 months later, he moved in. 4 months later, he managed her company's finances. 6 months later, she had nothing. The house foreclosed, the business accounts emptied, Lily's tuition fund vanished into thin air. And Brandon, the man who had spoken the sweetest words to her, disappeared as if he had never existed, leaving my sister on the kitchen floor holding her daughter, who was still doing homework, unaware that the world around her had collapsed. He left behind papers filled with Emma's signatures she didn't remember giving. Maybe forged, maybe signed when she wasn't fully aware. But however it happened, the outcome was the same. My sister was in debt, alone. I heard her sob through the phone, then fall silent. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply sat in the dark and made a promise. He had destroyed my sister with intelligence, manipulation, and the law. I would destroy him, not with knives or tears, but with evidence, with truth, with the same precision and patience he once used to bury Emma. And that was when my plan began. Chapter 2, A Promise Turns into a Plan. From that day on, I was no longer myself. Or perhaps I finally became the version I'd always been afraid to face, the kind of person who could wait years just to repay a debt that no one but me had decided must be collected. My name was Sarah Mitchell. At least it used to be. But Sarah was too gentle, too vulnerable too, invisible in a world ruled by men like Brandon Shaw. So I erased Sarah from everything, and I created Mia Carson. Mia was the kind of woman men like Brandon noticed elegant, sharp, intelligent, just enough to intrigue them, but not so much as to raise suspicion. I learned to speak differently, to walk differently, to even change the tone of my voice. I retrained myself to laugh in the exact frequency powerful men found pleasing. I studied marketing, branding, the psychology of con artists. I learned how to read financial charts, how to trace money flows, and even the most sophisticated tricks of laundering. I spent 9 years perfecting Mia Carson. 9 years without loving anyone, without trusting anyone, without taking my eyes off a single target. Meeting Brandon again, not to confront him, not to beg for anything, but to have him choose me once more as his new prey. And then the day arrived. I saw him at a fundraising gala in Miami. He stood at the bar, framed by lights, and the sound of jazz telling a joke to 3 men who nodded in admiration. The same smile. The same way he adjusted his cuff as if every gesture carried market value. I stood not far away, holding a glass of wine, watching. Not a trace of fear. He looked at me just as I had calculated and walked over. "Have we met?" before he asked, his voice as smooth as expensive liquor. I tilted my head, smiling lightly like a breeze passing through. "No," I said. "But I have a feeling we'll be very familiar with each other soon." He laughed. He took the bait. And from that very moment, I knew everything had begun to shift. Chapter 3. The Hunter and the Prey. 3 weeks after that night, I had become the woman Brandon texted every morning and called every night. Step by step, I carefully turned myself into the perfect mirror for his inflated ego. I listened when he droned on about the markets, admired him at the right moments, laughed at the right jokes, and asked just enough questions to make him feel like a master. I didn't need to love. I only needed to perform. He began calling me the special one. He said I wasn't like the women before, that I knew my place. He liked that a woman who knew how to look at him with adoration without ever challenging his power. I let him think he was in control of the game. But in truth, every message, every conversation, every touch of his hand, I recorded them in memory, piecing them together like fragments of a larger picture. A picture that would bury him. By the 8th week, he asked me to move into his penthouse. A place so luxurious, so ostentatious, that if I had still been Sarah, perhaps I would have stepped back. But Mia Carson didn't. I nodded, smiled, kissed his cheek, and whispered, "I'm so grateful." On the very first night I entered the apartment, I observed every corner security cameras, the safe financial files, his desk. I memorized it all. Every door, every wall, every trace of his confidence, that no one could ever touch him. He took me on a tour, proudly showing off the safe, in his office, opening it in front of me, without bothering to hide the code. Inside was cash, financial documents, contracts, everything he thought was power. I memorized every number, every rhythm of his fingers pressing the code. "I believe in transparency in a relationship," he said, his mouth curved in a smug smile. I nodded, laying my hand gently on his arm. I believed in transparency too, but in an entirely different way. The gold necklace I always wore, a family keepsake I had called it, was in fact a tiny recording device. I switched it on whenever he started talking about his business, about the deals he considered his triumphs. After 3 weeks, I had already planted 3 hidden cameras in the apartment. One in his office aimed directly at the desk. One in the bookshelf where he often made calls to negotiate contracts. And one concealed inside a pen holder, the gift I had given him to celebrate us moving in together. "You're so thoughtful," he praised. "Other women just buy flowers." I smiled, emphasizing each word. "I want everything you touch to be something you'll never forget." And he had no idea that very gift would one day capture the entirety of his downfall. Chapter 4. When the nightmare begins to show its face. From the day I moved in with him, I learned one thing. Brandon wasn't just a con artist. He was a man who believed everyone around him existed solely to serve him. And when I say everyone, I mean employees, friends, and me. At first, he still kept up the charming facade, buying flowers, reserving dinner tables, calling me his queen. But only a few weeks later, the sweet words began to carry the stench of control. "Don't wear that dress again," he said one morning. "It makes you look ordinary." Or that friend of yours, Clara, doesn't seem ambitious at all, does she? Surrounding yourself with people like that will only hold you back. I smiled, nodded, and remembered. These things didn't hurt me. They only solidified my resolve that he had to be destroyed. It was during this time that I became closer to Clara Brandon's personal assistant. Clara was a woman in her 50s, widowed, always eager to tell stories about her grandchildren whenever someone was willing to listen. And I always listened. I brought her coffee every Tuesday morning, asked about her health, remembered the names of each grandchild. Gradually, Clara began to open up. She told me about working until midnight, about the shady phone calls Brandon ordered her not to document, about contracts without any supporting files, about clients calling in tears while Brandon simply shrugged. Not my problem. I just sat there, nodding occasionally, adding, "That must be hard, Clara. You must be so stressed." And Clara kept talking. No one suspected that I was recording everything. Brandon always thought of me as a decorative ornament, obedient, pretty harmless. He never imagined that while he slept, I was quietly piecing together the puzzle of his corrupted life. On those nights when Brandon lay beside me, sleeping soundly like a child after a day of destroying lives, I sat in the corner with my headphones on, replaying every recording, taking notes, storing files, comparing them with the documents Gerald, my private investigator, had been sending me. On the outside, I was still the ideal woman, beautiful, gentle, silent at the right moments. But on the inside, I was building a fortress of evidence, a weapon that, when the time came, not even the sharpest lawyer could save him from. There was one evening after a party when he laughed over a glass of wine and said, "You know, I once had some girl who thought she could take me to court. She thought she could beat me with feelings and justice. I buried her alive under paperwork." I looked at him, poured more wine into his glass, and softly said, "Maybe she didn't know how to fight the right way." He roared with laughter, wrapping his arm around me, completely unaware that the person who would bury him next was lying right there in his arms. Chapter 5, I became the woman he'd never recognize. From the moment I decided to destroy Brandon's life, I understood one thing. If I wanted to get close to him, I had to become the type of woman he was always drawn to. Not the strong, independent kind like my sister, not the kind who asked questions, but the soft kind, slightly admiring, always looking at him as if he were a god, at least on the surface. And that's exactly what I became. I changed the way I dressed, body-hugging dresses, high heels, the perfume he once said his ex used to wear. I trained my voice lighter, softer. I learned how to ask questions that made him feel like a genius. How do you always pick the right stocks? Hearing you talk about investing is like listening to Mozart explain music. I wish I had just a tenth of your brain. I lied as naturally as I breathed, and he drowned in it like an addict, high on his own reflection. After 3 months, I had my own Wi-Fi password access to his company's internal network and a spare key to his penthouse he didn't know I had. Inside the apartment, I began installing mini cameras, the ultra-small kind, no bigger than the tip of a chopstick. One hidden in the air vent right in front of his desk, another in the bookshelf where he liked to read documents, and one, my most discreet move, was embedded in a 100-day anniversary gift, a pen holder engraved with the words, "You inspire me." Brandon burst out laughing when he received it. "Usually women give cologne or ties," he said. "You give me a pen holder. You're different." I smiled my lips, brushing a glass of red wine. "I just want you to remember that every decision you write inspires." He had no idea that every decision was being recorded. Within 4 months, I had mapped nearly all his habits. When he used speakerphone, when he opened the black notebook where he jotted down off-record deals, when he logged into anonymous offshore accounts, I recorded it all, screenshotted, captured audio, stored on multiple drives hidden in multiple places. One copy I sent to Gerald, my private investigator. One was locked in my bank's safety deposit box. The rest were stored in an encrypted email chain programmed to autosend if I disappeared for more than 48 hours. Brandon remained carefree. One evening he lounged on the sofa, wine swirling in his hand, the light casting smug reflections on his face. "You know why I love you?" he asked. "Because you're not like other women. You don't annoy me with all that morality nonsense. You understand this world isn't a fairy tale." I leaned into him, pretending to be delicate. "This world really is harsh. I'm lucky to have you to guide me." He kissed my forehead. "I'll make you a queen. But remember, a queen, not a daydreaming princess." I nodded, clutching tight to the memory of Emma, my sister, who once believed in fairy tales and lost everything. I knew I couldn't be like her. I wasn't here to dream. I was here to collect the debt. And I was getting closer to that day. Chapter 6. Cracks in the perfect mask. Brandon started calling me his safe asset. It sounded like a compliment, but to him everything was an investment, even me. When I moved in with him, I was granted full access to his most private world. Not just the expensive penthouse, but his schedule, his meetings, and the bank accounts he thought I'd never know about. That was when I began to see the darker side, not just snide remarks or bragging, but raw power and ruthless control. Get rid of that coach bag. Hermes suits you better when meeting the Hendersons. Keep your laugh down tonight. You're sounding a little street. Stop calling your mom. She's not helping you, just making you weak. I kept smiling, kept saying yes, of course. But inside, I was carving each word into the secret journal, hidden beneath a floorboard in the dressing room. Every day, I recorded everything. The day he belittled me in front of clients. The day he made me change my meal because it looked cheap. The day he began cutting me off from the people I once called mine. I didn't fight back, I observed, because I knew the closer I was, the more shattered pieces I could collect from his carefully crafted mask. One night he sat at the dining table, face flushed with wine, proudly rambling about a deal he'd just closed. He spoke with such self-satisfaction, I didn't even have to prompt him. Old man Peterson signed without reading. Now he and his wife lost their house in Palm Springs. But hey, not my fault. I poured him another glass, silently memorizing every name, every date. Then he laughed, that hollow, soulless laugh. I didn't scam them. They chose to trust me. That's on them. I replied as softly as a passing breeze. You're just smarter than them. They should have known better. His eyes lit up. He kissed my hand and said what he probably thought was a declaration of love. You're the only one who truly understands me. He was right. I did understand him. More than anyone ever had. I knew he always coated his poison in honey to make women feel chosen. Then, once they trusted him, he drained them of their money, their dignity, their strength. I knew every smile, every vow was just a tool for one goal: control. I knew, because he once did the same to my sister. And now I was using those very same tactics to peel back the layers of the persona he so carefully constructed. He thought he was taming a doll. He didn't know that doll was quietly waiting for the moment to tear the entire stage down. Chapter 7, The Wall of Trust. I think the moment I knew I had won was when he gave me the bank password. No secrets between husband and wife. He said, smiling, but with eyes full of calculation, I trust you. I nodded, smiling back. Trust me good. The more trust, the harder the fall. Since the day we married, my name had been added to a slew of account investment, business insurance funds, even assets under the company's name that he assumed I wouldn't understand. I played the part of the naive, grateful wife, and he loved it. Loved the idea that I was dependent on him. Loved being the one who led the way. What he didn't know was that I had recorded every one of his moves, every shady transaction, every fraudulent promise, every email he deleted, thinking it had vanished. I had copies of them all. I had installed a new camera in his office, no larger than a shirt button, hidden in the bookshelf I personally dusted every week. Once he signed a fake contract, his hands trembling with excitement. So intoxicated with power, he never suspected he was performing for a hidden lens. One night I sat beside him as he took a call from a partner currently under investigation. He put the phone on speaker. I kept calmly painting my nails beside him as if I wasn't hearing a word. "Don't worry," he said into the phone. "The money's been routed through 3 shell companies. No one will ever trace it." I drew a tiny flower on my thumbnail. Simple, delicate, but razor sharp. Piece by piece, his entire game was being assembled by me into a full panoramic picture he didn't even know existed. Even his secretary, Clara, was unintentionally helping me. A kind older woman who constantly talked about job stress and missing her grandson. I brought her coffee every morning, asked after her health, listened patiently, and one day she let something slip. He has a private file room in the basement. The password changes all the time, but lately he's been using the name of his mom's old cat. I smiled. Brandon never hid anything more carelessly than the things he thought were secure. His pride was his greatest weakness. I started calling it the Shaw file, the secret dossier that Gerald, my private investigator, and I were quietly building behind the scenes. Recordings, videos, paper trails, testimonies, each piece revealing the horrifying truth behind a man posing as a successful entrepreneur. And I knew all I needed now was the final piece, a confession, clear, undeniable, inescapable. Then I could press the button that would end the game. But to get it, I needed Brandon drunk, and I needed one name, Emma, the name I hadn't dared to speak aloud for almost 5 years, because I knew the moment it left my lips, the monster inside him would rise, and in that moment, he would burn down everything he had tried so hard to bury. Chapter 8. When he mentioned Emma, the Aspen trip was planned as a reward for his latest successful scheme. I didn't object, secluded, setting expensive, wine-snow blanketed silence, and no one to interrupt. Perfect for my next move. Brandon was radiating smugness. He had just scammed several $1 million from a retirement investment fund. Just a bunch of old geezers who can't read, he'd scoffed, his voice laced with contempt. We're simply reallocating money from the stupid to the people who know how to use it. I just smiled and poured him more wine, a bottle of red already uncorked. I didn't need to get him drunk. I just had to let him get drunk on himself. We sat by the fireplace in the wooden chalet he had rented. I was curled up in a thick sweater, though inside my chest my heart pounded like war drums, because I knew tonight I would lead him into the final trap. I tilted my head and asked, "You once said there was a woman who hurt you. Who was she?" He chuckled, curled his lip. "Pretty sure you don't want to know," I whispered, practically pouring honey into his ear. "I want to know everything about you." And just as I predicted, he began to talk. "Emma." He spat the name out like flicking away trash. "Your sister. The one who thought she was clever." My heart clenched, but my face didn't flinch. She wasted so much of my time. Lawyers' media threats, lawsuits. Do you know how much I spent silencing her? But in the end, it was done. Lost her kid. Lost her house. Lost everything. He raised his glass like he was toasting the defeat of the past. I leaned in slightly, my voice like a breeze. And if she came back. He burst into laughter. "No one believes her anymore. She's a joke. A failure. I destroyed her down to the root." I nodded as if in agreement, but inside my blood was boiling. Because what he had just confessed was more than enough to bring it all to an end. It wasn't just the admission. It was his attitude, the arrogance, the delight he took in describing someone else's suffering, the way he spoke about my sister as if she were nothing but a disposable pawn. That night, after he passed out from the wine, I slipped into the bathroom, opened my laptop, and sent the recording to Gerald. The subject line contained only 2 words, "It's time." And the reply came almost immediately. We begin the final phase. Chapter 9. The final move, a ring and a proposal. 6 months after that fateful night in Aspen, he knelt before me on a luxury yacht in the Bahamas, with the sunset behind us glowing like a painting meticulously brushed to perfection. The ring he held out was so large it reflected my entire face. I smiled, eyes glistening with tears. He thought I was moved. He thought I was touched by love, by the expensive gift, by a fairy tale promise. But I wasn't. I cried because I knew from this moment on I would have access to everything. Accounts, passwords, offshore funds, documents, contracts. He would no longer have a reason or an excuse to hide anything. I said yes with the softest smile I had ever practiced in the mirror. Our wedding was simple, swift. Just a few of his close associates from the investment world, his parents, and a handful of witnesses arranged by his lawyers. When I suggested inviting my own family, he waved it off. We have to maintain appearances. They don't really fit the image. I nodded. It didn't matter. My entire life had been a performance. I could play the part for a few more weeks. The very next day, the joint accounts appeared. I was issued a luxury credit card under the name Mrs. Shaw. My name was added to corporate insurance policies. I was listed on property deeds, vehicle ownership, and even the shadowy shareholdings he thought were cleverly hidden. But with power came tightening control. Where are you going? Lunch with an old friend? Who is he, a college friend? Gay. Be home before 3 p.m.? I nodded, as always. On the outside, I was the perfect wife, cooking his favorite meals, wearing the dresses he picked, laughing on cue when he needed to appear successful. But on the inside, I had become a living surveillance system. Every word he spoke was recorded. Every keystroke on his laptop was extracted. The microcameras I'd installed in his office or bedroom, even the wedding photo frame held secrets he would never suspect. That frame he once proudly showed it off to guests. That's my favorite wedding photo. How ironic. Because that frame would soon capture the moment he lost everything. But the most valuable tool wasn't the recordings. It was the blind trust he gave me. One time he joked, I should let you handle our cybersecurity. You're learning so fast. I smiled, powering down a computer that had just finished backing up hundreds of gigabytes of fraudulent documents into an encrypted drive. I'm just trying to keep up with my genius husband. And in the journal I kept hidden under a loose floorboard, I wrote Day 312. He said, I love you, after concluding a call that scammed 20 high-profile clients. But his eyes didn't shine from love. They lit up at the number he had just stolen. I didn't reply. I just memorized every word. I knew I'd come too far to turn back, but I also knew everything I needed to end this monster was already in my hands. Only one move remained, to turn him into a dead man walking on the very same boat where he once knelt and asked for my hand. Chapter 10. The Yacht Party, a Cold-Blooded Conclusion. It took me nearly a year to plan for that day, the day everything would end. And I chose the exact place where it all began, a yacht. Still the calm ocean. Still the golden sunset shimmering across the waves. Still champagne glasses, high-profile guests. Tuxedos worth thousands. The only difference this time was that I would be the one ending it. We should invite the Hendersons, the Carmichaels. And Roger from the Manhattan deal, he said, sipping his morning espresso like he was chairing a board meeting. I nodded, jotting names onto the guest list. He had no idea I had marked those 3 names in red, 3 undercover federal agents posing as high-end investors. I'd been working with them for 4 months, sending documents, audio recordings, passwords, evidence, one piece at a time. When Brandon stood on the deck that night, smiling glass raised the sunset, reflecting off the jewels on his wrist. I knew. This was it. Thanks, everyone, for being here. 5 years with the most amazing wife in the world, he announced, the crowd erupting in applause. Then he turned to me, smirking. And now, let's raise a glass to me for surviving a gold digger. Laughter burst out. He laughed. His parents laughed. The investors laughed. I laughed too. I set my glass down on the table, stepped onto the center of the deck, my silk dress glimmering in the golden hour. And then I spoke, my voice soft as sea breeze. Enjoy the view while you can, because this is the last time you'll ever see the free world. The yacht's engines died in an instant. Everyone turned murmurs rising like waves. A sharp cold gust cut through the stillness. Then, 4 men in black emerged from the lower cabin. The air froze. I pulled a small USB drive from my clutch, labeled Confessions, sorted by month. Brandon looked at me, smirked. What kind of joke is this? I didn't answer. I simply handed the drive to Agent Rodriguez. Brandon took a step back, then another, then spun around and bolted toward the side of the yacht. He shouted at his parents, "Call the lawyer. Call Morrison. Call anyone," but it was too late. Agent Rodriguez moved like lightning, grabbed him by the collar, and slammed him to the deck. The sound of handcuffs snapped through the night like a death knell. Brandon was yanked upright, his face white as bone. He turned to look at me, his eyes a storm of rage, disbelief, and fear. I stepped forward slowly, each stride like the final notes of a perfectly orchestrated symphony. Standing before him, I leaned in close and whispered, "You once told me that trust is a weakness. Thank you for that lesson." Then I stepped back, watching as he was led away like a criminal in front of the very crowd that once adored him. Some guests stood frozen in place. Others took out their phones, recording the entire spectacle. His parents stood pale, speechless. And I simply stood there, silent, calm, with a quiet smile on my lips. 5 years of endurance. 9 years of preparation. 1 moment to end it all. He destroyed my sister Lily and dozens of other families. And now I had just destroyed him. Chapter 11, Freedom and a New Beginning. After that yacht party, everything unfolded faster than I expected. Brandon was denied bail. Federal agents raided his entire penthouse, his office, and the cloud storage I had secretly synced for the past 2 years. The victims began to speak up. People who had once been terrified into silence by contracts, lawyers, and threats were now no longer alone. And Emma. My sister finally got back the life Brandon had stolen from her. The court reopened her case with the new evidence. The judge this time, a different one, couldn't hide his disgust as he reviewed the Shaw file that Gerald and I had spent 5 years compiling. The restraining order was overturned. Full custody of Lily was returned to Emma. I couldn't hold back tears as I watched them hug for the first time in 3 years. No more brief visitations, no more supervision, no more explaining to a child why her mother couldn't be by her side. I had made a promise to Emma, and I had kept it. As for Brandon, he faced 36 criminal charges ranging from financial fraud and money laundering to abuse of legal guardianship. And when the trial began, the media didn't miss a single detail. The entire country knew the name Brandon Shaw, not as a successful entrepreneur, but as the con man in a suit. He filed for appeal. Of course, he never believed he could lose, but the evidence was undeniable. He was sentenced to 28 years in federal prison. No parole, no leniency. I didn't attend the sentencing. I stayed home, made tea for Emma and Lily. We laughed, talked about going to the beach that weekend, about dishes Lily wanted to try, about the future. For the first time in nearly a decade, I didn't have to lie to survive. I turned down every interview request. Journalists, film producers, publishers, they all wanted to turn the story into commercial property. A book, a movie, a Netflix series. But I had lived that story. I didn't need it turned into entertainment. I chose a different path. I used the divorce settlement and the seized funds recovered from Brandon's hidden accounts to open a small office. No big names, no flashy signs, just a single door that read, "Financial Recovery Counseling for Victims of Financial Control." My first client was a woman named Maria. Her husband controlled every cent, forcing her to beg for money. The second was an elderly woman whose own son had stolen her entire retirement fund. I didn't just hand them legal documents. I gave them back ownership of their lives. And I didn't do it alone. Gerald, the one who had walked beside me through every phase of this journey, helped turn the Shaw file into an official training program now shared with nonprofits and financial investigation agencies nationwide. Brandon Shaw was once a force of influence. Now he's a warning. I am no longer Mia Carson. I returned to being myself with old scars, but a heart no longer heavy. One morning, I walked along the beach with Emma and Lily. The sea breeze was gentle waves lapping at the shore like nothing bad had ever happened in the world. From my pocket, I pulled the necklace I had worn for 5 years. It looked like a simple piece of jewelry, but in truth, it was the recording device that had captured every one of Brandon's confessions. I held it in my palm for a long moment, then threw it hard into the ocean. It hit the water, made a small ripple, and disappeared. No sound, no trace. "It's over," I whispered, staring at the still horizon. Emma gently squeezed my hand. "Thank you for bringing me and my daughter home." I just smiled. Ahead of us was light, peace, doors opening without the shadows. And for the first time in so long, I no longer felt like a warrior. I was simply a woman who had reclaimed freedom for the people she loved. And that was enough. I didn't become a hero. And I wasn't the villain either. I was just an ordinary woman who stood up when no one else could. Brandon Shaw once had it all: power, money, and the confidence that he'd never be caught. But what he never expected was this. It was his arrogance that paved the way for me to get close to document and to take him down step by step. I didn't choose revenge out of anger. I chose it to survive. For Emma, for Lily, and for everyone who's ever been swallowed by darkness while the world looked away. He wasn't just handcuffed, he was unmasked. And now every time someone says, "You can't fight someone more powerful," I smile, because I did, and so can you.